Still with me is Nina Salerno, president of Crime Victims United of California and deputy director at Death Penalty Action, Reverend Brandy Slaughter. Thank you guys for staying with me. Nina, I want to go back to something you said about justice and how the victims of these crimes, the families of the victims of these violent crimes want justice by seeing someone executed. I just want to ask you what justice means. And I think that, with these, like I said, the series that we have every week where we highlight a wrongfully accused, wrongfully convicted, and wrongfully sentenced to death individual, is that sometimes justice may feel like it means finality, just to have that final nail in the coffin, but not necessarily the fairness of it all. What do you say about that? That sometimes the legal system can do a disservice to these victims by not actually getting the correct individual, the correct guilty party of these crimes.
I don't think any victim wants somebody that's not guilty to be convicted of a crime. Justice for victims means the perpetrator of the crime is tried and convicted, and whatever the sentence is, as a victim, you have to accept that. Not only have you buried your loved one or loved ones, or seen the trauma that it takes on an entire family, we have to accept that. We also have to accept what the law of our system or the juries hand down. I didn't agree with the second-degree murder of my sister's killer. He stalked and he executed her. I believe he should be on death row. But I had to accept second-degree murder. So I do my best to see that he continues to serve his life sentence. For those that are associated with death row, it is seeing that the sentence that was handed down carried out. And to my colleague's point, I just want to say one thing about the governor. He has the ability to grant clemency. So if he truly, after looking at the facts, as many governors do, and I remember when Governor Bush was governor of Texas and there was a mass murderer on death row that had crossed state lines, he did not believe that the murderer committed the murder in Texas, so he granted clemency. A governor has that power, but the governor should not have the power to take his personal belief and just shut down death row when it's been voted in.
That's an interesting point. Reverend Brandy Slaughter, your response to that, in that the governor could look at these individual cases himself and actually do something about it. But in turn, doesn't that take a lot of time and resources that the state just doesn't have?
Yeah, it does. And I think my point is I want justice too. When we look at this system and how flawed it is, and we're looking at 690 individuals, 68% of the men are Black men. There's no way that all of those sentences were handed down fairly. There's just no way, because every stage of the process, there are disparities. And so for me, yeah, we all want justice. Justice for the victims are important, but justice also in terms of racial equity, because there isn't any in this system. And California is a huge example of that. Just the way that the sentences are handed down are an example of that. And as a woman of faith, I have to just raise this. I am a Christian, a woman who sits in church Sunday after Sunday, worshiping a crucified Savior, but a person, a Savior, a Jesus Christ, who pardoned the woman who was actually guilty, actually caught in the very act of adultery. And so if I need to model my faith, I need to be an example of that. And it's hard to stand by and say that what Governor Newsom is doing is wrong, because we're not talking about people not being accountable. They're being accountable to their crime. And everyone doesn't heal the same way. And so for me, I feel like the governor is doing the right thing. And I think the place of advocacy, the point where we should be participating is looking at the rules, making sure that folks are safe, learning more about how this is going to roll out and play out, because there's no question. I feel for the victims. I truly do. And as a woman of faith, I'm praying for them. I really am. I'm holding them in my heart. But at the same time, we know that there are innocent people in jail. We know that there are people, I believe that there are people that participated and had crimes that had things in their upbringing where we failed them systemically. So I don't agree with a lot of what's been shared today.
Nina Salerno, Reverend Brandy Slaughter, I appreciate your time and insight tonight on this very important issue. I appreciate you both. Thank you. We'll be right back.